So good morning and welcome everyone. Thank you all for finding time and joining us on the Middle East biggest virtual e-commerce summit, eCommerce Reimagined Strategies and Growth Levers post-COVID-19. My name is Kapil Makija and I'm the CEO of Unicommerce. As you must be aware, we are the largest supply chain automation company in India and Middle East, processing 2 million orders a day and $2.5 billion of GMV annually. And we've lined up today a power-packed day for all of you. Joining with us are all the pioneers of Middle East e-commerce ecosystem, evangelizing the digital transformations in retail and other industries in their own sectors. And today being the International MSME Day, it makes it even more special for us, as we've already worked with more than 10,000 SMEs in India and Middle East, simplifying e-commerce selling for them, and hope this ecosystem can benefit both the SMEs and brands alike. This is our first endeavor to build a robust e-commerce ecosystem in the Middle East region, and hoping that all of you have a lot to take away from today's sessions in being able to plan your e-commerce growth in the times to come. We all know that COVID-19 has been a major catastrophe for all businesses alike, and every business across the globe has been impacted. And the world is now coming to a little standstill, and social distancing becoming an integral part of daily lives. I think people are now afraid of stepping out of our homes and relying heavily on e-commerce for their special needs. And every research and study predicts that this is going to benefit the e-commerce industry in the long term. And many categories such as electronic, grocery, etc. have shown remarkable growth in the last 2 months in the region. Thus, we thought this is an apt time to build such an ecosystem, get all the experts together, and solving the queries that businesses have in general for starting online or managing their online operations. We've organized today's webinar in 2 sessions. The first one that I'll be moderating will be focusing on e-commerce strategies in a post-COVID-19 era. And the second session is focused on driving e-commerce growth. Like I mentioned that we've seen different categories showing a lot of growth, particularly grocery, which has seen 500% growth already. And what was even more interesting to see is that the last few months actually saw many first-time online buyers log in to shop for their needs. And coupled with Ramadan last month, there was a huge spike where many businesses actually ended up doing 25% of their last year's GMV in just 1 month. And we are seeing even SMEs taking to digital transformation in a big way, with at least 20% launching either their own website or transacting through WhatsApp to do commerce in the last 2 months. So to help us understand the shift in consumer behavior and decide the best e-commerce strategies to deploy in a post-COVID-19 era, we have some very accomplished speakers here today. So without further ado, I would request all the panelists to introduce themselves before we start our discussion on the topic of e-commerce strategies post-COVID-19 era. Sean, maybe we'll start with you. If you can give a brief introduction about you for the benefit of the audience.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sean McCarry. I'm from Magento, and I'm responsible for all sales across the Europe, Middle East, and Africa.
Great, Sean. Thank you. Anshuk, maybe we can go next with you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Anshuk. I'm one of the co-founders of AdYogi. AdYogi is a marketing automation platform. We work with 100+ e-commerce companies in helping them scale via Facebook and Google Ads. We have seen very good response coming from own website when compared to marketplaces. So we have seen brands scale from, let's say, 2% of overall sales coming from website to roughly around 20% of overall sales, effectively using Facebook and Google Ads. We are a Facebook and a Google marketing automation platform. Very excited to be part of this webinar.
Thanks, Anshul. Raghu, maybe we can go next with you. Can't hear you, Raghu. You're on mute.
Hello, everyone. I'm Raghu, co-founder and CEO for Yellow Messenger. We are Asia's largest conversational AI platform. We help 200+ brands offer commerce, customer support, and customer engagement on messaging and voice platforms like WhatsApp, Google Assistant, Alexa, and telephony.
Great, thanks, Raghu. Hasan, if you could please give your introduction to the audience.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. I'm Hasan, a co-founder and chief operating officer for Salasa Fulfillment Company. We are basically offering fulfillment services for online stores and e-commerce players. So we are offering end-to-end supply chain from freight forwarding for your goods till we deliver it to your end customer, the consigning. And thank you so much for the opportunity, and I'm glad to be a part of this webinar. Thank you.
Sure, our pleasure. Pranshu, if you could also give your introduction.
Yep. Hi, everyone. I'm Pranshu. I'm VP Business at ClickPost. ClickPost is one of the largest logistics technology platforms for e-commerce companies in Asia. Happy to be a part of this conversation.
Great. Thanks, everyone. And just a reminder to the audience for any questions. So we'll be taking questions at the end of the session. We will do the discussion for about 40 minutes or so. Post that, we'll be taking questions. Please post your questions in the Q&A section so that we can take them up during the final discussion. Great. I think let's start about the topic of e-commerce strategies, especially in the post-COVID-19 era. Sean, my first question to you. See, when someone is starting out to build an e-commerce presence for themselves, the very first question that comes to their mind is whether they should build their own website or should they be listing on marketplaces. Magento being a pioneer in helping brands build their own presence and build a brand, how do you help different businesses make that decision, make that choice on what they should be doing?
Thank you for the question. As Magento, we believe in brand ownership. We believe in the customization to allow you to drive the innovation at the pace you want to as the brand owner. So I always would suggest on the controlling and owning that brand and having that customization with your own website. That doesn't mean that you can have the best of both. Within our platform, you can integrate easily with marketplaces. So as well as having a channel to the marketplace, you also can have that direct relationship with the consumer to drive revenue, to drive customer loyalty, but more importantly, to provide the customer experience. And within Adobe, that's something we're passionate about. The customer experience drives repeat business, it drives transactions, and therefore owning that website, building that website on the right platform where you can customize, you can own the responsibility of the innovation and drive revenues, again, through direct contact with the consumer, whether it's business to business as well, and also via marketplace.
Okay. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
Anshuk, since you actually have seen a lot of success with brands having their own presence and are helping them a lot in getting business through social media platforms, I think most businesses want to understand as to what is the right social platform for them. How do they choose it? Like with Facebook having the largest presence of about 180 million users in the region, or should it be Instagram, which is a more upcoming platform, or Google Ads? And if someone is selling a product in the range of 30 to 50 dirhams, what should be the ideal budget for them? How do they go about deciding on that?
Absolutely, Kapil. I think this is something which I usually tell a lot of brands we work with, that setting up your e-commerce store is actually the beginning of the journey. A lot of times we think that, look, you have set up our e-commerce store and the sales will come automatically. But what we have seen is it's 10% of the effort in setting it up. But the real journey of getting your customers purchase on your website is 90% of the effort. And of course, all the logistics linked up to it. Now, when you're starting your e-commerce website, it can get a little overwhelming given there are so many digital platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Google being the common ones, but there are also a long tail set of platforms where you can actually advertise. My recommendation would be do not spread your budget too thin across multiple platforms. Across most of the brands we have worked with, around 60 to 70% of the sales comes from Facebook and Instagram. And these are brands with all stages, whether it's an early stage or a mid-stage brand. So my recommendation would be start with Facebook and Instagram. Facebook, Instagram together can be optimized using one business manager. So you don't necessarily need to choose between the two platforms. Think of both platforms as connected when it comes to ads. Now, coming to the question of what is a good budget, usually when you start your first set of campaigns on Facebook or Instagram, you would need to set up a few campaigns and a few targeting options to be able to optimize them. In our opinion, what we have seen is roughly around 5,000 to 10,000 dirhams would be a very good budget to start. It will give you enough budget to optimize and experiment on these platforms.
Okay, great. I think that's a very useful insight. Thanks, Anshul. Raghu, as I mentioned in the beginning, that a lot of SMEs and even brands are now taking to WhatsApp. WhatsApp, we know, as is the most widely used platform to share content and information. But now it's being used to do commerce as well, and it's slowly getting adopted in emerging economies. And you've been the pioneers of kind of driving that movement across multiple geographies. But since it's a very new platform, most businesses want to understand that since there's not a lot of whole bit of ecosystem around it, what can they do to have a fully integratable solution for them to be able to sell on WhatsApp?
So there are two kind of brands. Brands which already have an e-commerce presence where they have the entire ecosystem set up and they want to use the WhatsApp bandwagon. In which case, the entire set of the existing ecosystem can be seamlessly integrated and WhatsApp just becomes another front end, like a company having a website and a mobile app. This becomes another interface or another channel for them to drive e-commerce, but the entire ecosystem in terms of logistics payments remains absolutely the same. So that's taken care of brands for which all the ecosystem exists. The second kind of brands that we are seeing is they are just starting on the e-commerce bandwagon and they haven't yet all the logistics and ecosystem figured out. In which case we are seeing those brands go WhatsApp first and platforms like ours are providing or we have pre-existing partnerships with logistics companies, payment companies, so that there is an entire stack that is provided as a template for brands to get onto commerce on WhatsApp. So those are the two ways of how brands are approaching commerce on WhatsApp.
Sure. Thanks for letting us know, Raghu. Hasan, now that we've talked about the front end, how to generate demand, I think one of the critical factors, particularly in COVID-19, has been to handle fulfillment. Most brands that we speak to within the region or even SMEs do not have the right expertise for handling the fulfillment, and you have been doing it at a large scale in the region already. Can you throw some light on, are there specific businesses or categories where outsourcing of fulfillment is probably worked out better? Does it depend on factors like product margin or product ASP, etc.?
Yeah, sure. So basically, there is two kinds of online businesses. There is pure online businesses where fulfillment it's a mandatory for them, and there is a brand who they have already their own retailers, stores, and they can do fulfillment out of there. However, with the COVID-19 and the pandemic, moving all these goods to a fulfillment and third-party logistics was a mandatory to keep their business up and running. So to choose a fulfillment center, there is different factors. The most important thing that what is the category of your product. So if you are doing cosmetics, so you need FDA approved warehouse. If you are doing fashion, you have to go with a third-party provider that understands how fashion works. Because if you compare fashion with home appliance or with heavy and bulk business, there is a different kind of operation and SLAs and method need to be considered when you choose your fulfillment center. However, this is the good thing that we have at Salasa. We have this kind of flexibility. So we are familiar with fashion, with home appliances. Today we are serving more than 14 categories where you can have this kind of flexibility. Because we found that sometimes you are running your own fashion business, but however, you can add another line with your fashion business where you can get in cosmetics. It's totally related. It's different kind of operation. So choosing your fulfillment partner should be based on this factor. However, if your partner have this kind of flexibility to serve your different categories, this is the most important thing. When it comes to margin base and all these stuff, this has come later because this is part of negotiations and you can further with your fulfillment and logistics partner.
Sure. Thanks, Hasan. Pranshu, the next question is for you. You built a very intelligent solution for getting intelligence to logistics and for making runtime decisions on logistics. I think one of the key pain areas that we've come across is failed delivery attempts, because it not only leads to additional cost for the business, but also a poor customer experience. Since you worked in both India and Middle East, what do you think have come out as the best practices for handling these failed delivery attempts? And particularly, have you seen any increase post COVID-19 due to a lot of new users coming into e-commerce? Have you seen this failed delivery number rising?
Yes. Hi, Kapil. So yes, the failed delivery numbers have increased significantly, primarily due to the new users coming in, and also because of the operational challenges that have suddenly increased due to the lockdown and other issues, right? Even as we move ahead, while the immediate issues due to lockdown have been relaxed, we see that the new user issue would continue to do so for the next an year or so. Right? So the number of new failed deliveries would be higher than the usual.
Okay.
Now, how do you handle these situations is something that we should ideally talk about. The worst thing that you can do is leave it to the delivery partner to make the next informed attempt, and then just hope for the best to happen. In my opinion, we have tried to implement a 3-step approach, which has seen the failed deliveries going down and they actually getting converted instead of the product coming back. The first thing is the moment that failed delivery happens, you should immediately trigger an SMS and an email to customer seeking the reason for failed delivery and a response on it. Right? So if, say, you think that the failed delivery happened due to address issue, that's what your system said. So ask them for a revised address and then send this data to the courier company. So you are in charge of making sure that the next attempt is an informed one.
Okay.
The second thing is, if the customer does not reply to this, then you enable an IVRS service. And if no response comes from these 2 steps, which happens in almost 50% of the cases, then you have to start calling up these customers in a sequential, instead of a sequential manner, you have to call them in a rule-based manner. So if 3 attempts have been made and the customer is still unreachable, you call them first. So that sort of prioritization has to be done.
Okay, great. Thanks, Pranshu. Sean, we've actually got a question in the audience as well, and I also was curious to understand this, that because we saw that more and more consumers are now shopping online, it is imperative that brands move online and build an online presence. There are 2 questions to this. One, that if somebody is to launch a website now, what are the top 2 or 3 considerations that they should have in mind while choosing the platform for front end? And what is the sort of investment that they should expect? And would be great if you can touch it upon for both a brand and an SME. That will be helpful for the audience. Sean, you're on mute.
But thank you again. It's interesting when we look at the US during the months of April and May, there's been an additional $52 billion of online spend. And if you look at April and May again in the US in a recent report, there's over 77% year-over-year growth. So I think that going online conversation is now a priority with many brands, and that's the demand we're seeing. When it comes to the questions of what you should consider, there's the obvious questions about speed to market. You don't want to engage in a platform development which is going to take a long time because of the monetization conversations. So I think that's important. We touched on the earlier question on customization and owning your brand. I think it's really important. So, for instance, we did a report across the UAE on consumer behavior, and price, free delivery, but also ease of use of your website were key priorities for the consumer in the region. So I do think customization has got to be part of that, because you are owning your brand, you want to drive that. Speed to market, absolutely, but local presence with implementation partners. At Magento, we have market leading platform. It has a very fast speed to market, but what's critical is our partner ecosystem. We have a very large partner ecosystem within the region, and those are the partners that would deliver and implement this solution. So customization, speed to market, but also understand the priorities of what your business requires, whether it's a business to business website functionality or business to consumer, because that leads to customer segmentation, driving loyalty, and that overall customer experience. So I hope that covers that.
Sure. No, this is very interesting that you pointed out. And in fact, we are seeing an even higher increased interest in the B2B segment, B2B commerce segment. A lot of distributors in the region want to build their B2B websites and take these transactions online. Are there any, is there a specific business size that Magento or your partners look at before implementing these B2B e-commerce websites?
No, we're dealing with, especially across the region where, it's a really interesting region for Magento, and it's a very high growth area for us. But we're seeing everything from the SME who's starting with a online expected revenue of under $1 million or even a lot less. And we're also dealing with organizations who are talking about $1 billion plus. What's interesting is we're seeing organizations that had a mix of business to business and business B2C environments. Their B2B business has dropped during COVID-19 because obviously a lot of physical stores have been closed.
Sure.
So during this period, these organizations have been able to take B2B functionality and move it to B2C very quickly. And we have organizations which have seen a 50% drop in their B2B business and a 600% increase in their B2C business, which I think will fundamentally change their go-to-market strategies in the future, because normally the margins on a B2C business is higher than on a B2B side.
Yeah.
So I do think post-COVID-19, we're going to be in a very different world. I think the online demand is going to increase, and listening to my colleagues talking about the importance of the delivery stage, it's one of the key areas for cart abandonment.
Right.
So I do think you've got to consider all stages of that customer experience
Sure.
to make digital and physical integrated.
Sure. Thanks, Sean. Anshuk, a related question to you. While we understand COVID-19 has given a definite boost to e-commerce, and some of these sectors, as Sean also rightly pointed out, have seen growth rates of north of 500% also. But across the globe, and particularly Middle East region, we've seen the economy has been hit in general, and the consumption mindset is definitely going to get impacted. So the questions that we received even offline also, businesses wanted to understand, is it a good time for them to be investing in marketing? And if yes, should they be tempering down their expectations on the returns that they can expect from such marketing or promotional campaigns?
Absolutely, Kapil. I think that's a very relevant question. We saw that in the month of March, as COVID started hitting the markets, there are 2-3 things which happened. A lot of marketers actually stopped marketing because they said that, look, our warehouse is shut down, our delivery providers are not delivering, in some geographies, of course. And we saw the cost of ads on platforms like Facebook and Instagram drop down. It was a pure demand supply. There was less demand and more supply of inventory on Facebook. So we saw around 60 to 70% drop in the cost per ads. Now, as the lockdown is lifting in most parts of the world, the cost of advertising on Facebook is gradually rising up. But even today, as of last week, when we did an analysis, we figured out that it's still around 15 to 20% lower, which essentially means that today, if an e-commerce company wants to market themselves, they'll be able to reach out to more customers, at least approximately 20-25% additional potential customers at the same price. Now, second key factor of an e-commerce marketing is even if you get these people to your website, are they converting or not? Right? Conversion rate is a very core to efficiency on an e-commerce website.
That's true.
What we have seen in the post-COVID era is because offline seems to have taken a little backseat in a lot of geographies, which means people are slightly more hesitant to visit malls. Conversion rates on online websites have gone up. We did a recent survey and we found out amongst the brands we work with, there is a 20 to 30% uplift in conversion rate across most of the brands.
Okay.
So these two factors are actually coupling each other. So there's a 20% lower cost and a 20% higher conversion rate. So immediately in the months of May and June, we actually saw the efficiencies go up, which is quite contradictory to what you would imagine, right? So today, an e-commerce business, at least in these months, can expect something like a 3x to a 4x efficiency or even higher, which essentially means if you're spending like 1 dirham on marketing, you can probably get like 3 to 4 to 5 dirhams in sales. So my recommendation would be a great time to go online and a great time to actually do your first set of marketing campaigns.
Sure. Thanks, Anshuk. I think those are very great insights for the business. I think, especially with the higher efficiency now, I think brands can look forward to getting more and more consumers on board. Raghu, the next question is for you. Like we talked about, that there are a lot of new first-time buyers that we are seeing for online shopping, but they are also the more apprehensive lot. And Pranshu also touched upon that. That is also resulting in higher increase in number of failed deliveries. But there's some background noise. If the others can go on mute, please. Okay. So what we want to understand is that there is this whole trend of conversational AI for being able to engage with these first-time buyers and to be able to give them comfort about the whole shopping experience. Can you throw some light on some of the trends that you're seeing in this space to streamline the connect with these end consumers?
Absolutely. A significant part of the first-time buyers are essentially using online websites even for the first time, online apps for the first time. And they are most comfortable on platforms that they are using already. And messaging platforms come right into the mind. So we had an example of a leading FMCG brand, Adani Wilmar in India, get onto e-commerce bandwagon and to go to this audience who are transacting online for the first time for grocery. WhatsApp-based commerce proved to be the largest channel in terms of driving the number of transactions. So ease of enablement is the first use case. Second, a lot of the new age buyers need assistance while transacting. Paid assistance around pricing, assistance around product features, and the ability of the platform or the company brand to provide that guidance in a language that they are conversant with. So could be an Arabic, could be a local vernacular language where they are providing inputs on the products that they are buying. We have seen that ease up the entire buying process and improve conversions. And Yellow Messenger has been a highest proponent of providing these conversational elements both on websites, mobile apps, apart from the new age messaging platforms like WhatsApp and vernacular language is helping them. And the third and last part is about automation of customer support. Brands want to optimize on costs, so conversational AI is providing automation across these channels to reduce the inefficiencies in customer support.
Sure. Thanks, Raghu. Hasan, the question is next question is for you. While we've talked about how e-commerce demand has increased, but it also resulted in supply challenges to which both you and also Pranshu touched upon, particularly with spikes due to Ramadan as well as COVID-19. And because there were many first-time users, they were also more apprehensive about these delayed deliveries. Can you let us know some of the steps that you took to reduce this uncertainty on both fulfillment and delivery times, particularly in the last couple of months?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So basically, it's the whole cycle is about managing the expectation of the end customer and your clients. So first of all, you have to have a very powerful tool to communicate with your clients, explaining to them that this is a pandemic, it's a very tough situations, and you have to understand that there is a total impact in the whole supply chain and logistics. This is number one, to manage expectations, I believe. Second thing, that you have to manage the capacity with your courier companies. So there is a courier providers, they have a huge pressure with this pandemic, so you have to manage the capacities with them. However, there is an issue with some of the online stores, online businesses, where they have only one contract with one courier company. And as you know, this is not helpful for them because they will lose their flexibility. So if this courier company failed, the whole business will be in a failure.
Sure.
For that, we at Salasa offer more options. So we have our own aggregator where you can integrate with more than 20 courier companies.
Okay.
By mentioning that, I give you the opportunity to have different options, different SLAs, and also different kind of service levels, rates, and so on. And honestly, we did our capacity management internally. So we push orders based on capacity for certain courier company based on the performance in that city or in that region.
Okay.
So these kind of innovations and value-added services we add to our client, we manage barely the issue of capacity and the failure of deliveries. And also, as you know, we did a lot of increase our working hours, more flexibility when it comes to cut-off times, relaxation, our SLAs. We did all these things just to meet our the client expectations and also the end consignee expectations.
Sure. Thanks, Hasan. Pranshu, a related question to you. We've always heard of the problem of non-standardization of addresses in the region. And like Hasan pointed out, there are many things that they have done to kind of address these challenges. I know you've also done a lot of work in both India and Middle East to build visibility in the end-to-end logistics and giving more visibility to end consumers. Are there specific themes that you saw emerge in the last 2 months in terms of investment in digital transformation? We've all talked about digital transformation happening all across, right? But particularly for logistics, are there any 2 or 3 themes that you've seen come up, and particularly for handling of these non-standardization addresses, long delivery times, etc.?
Yes. So, Kapil, indeed, the investment in logistics technology has increased significantly. We've seen more than 30 to 40% increase in terms of how many customers we used to get pre-COVID and after COVID.
Okay.
Now, if the top 3 areas that you talked about, if I have to point out these 3 areas, I would start with the first and the highest investment is going towards tracking and customer notifications.
Sure.
So what is happening is, because customers are really apprehensive of where their order is there a delay? You cannot just leave it to the courier companies to send them these SMS and email updates, right? That's something that should be owned by the brand.
Right.
So a lot of companies are trying to get this capability in-house, and we've seen calls related to where is my order, why is it delayed? These have gone down by up to 60% the moment you start to send out these notifications to customers.
Sure.
So that's the first area which has seen the biggest investment. The second area probably would be around managing exceptions. So there are a lot of technologies available to make sure that the exceptions are automated. But before COVID, smaller companies were not really concerned about it that much. Reason being that their overall volumes of exceptions were really less. But now, since the uncertainty has led to this huge spike in these exceptions, companies are investing in very exhaustive algorithms to make sure that these exceptions are automated. So just to give an example, suppose an order is kept somewhere in a warehouse for last 3 days and no scan has been made on it, right? So we have algorithms to automatically identify such exceptions and highlight them. So these sort of areas are seeing the next investment. Another big problem statement that is there for the companies is integrating with multiple courier partners. So as Hasan also pointed out, right? Now there is a constraint from logistics side. So you need to have multiple courier partners. You cannot just rely on a single company to deliver orders.
Right.
You're not really sure what would happen tomorrow. So integrations of different sort of APIs to generate payable number, to cancel the order, to track the order. These integrations are seeing a huge increase right now because companies have started to operate with multiple courier partners.
Right.
And then that's the third area of investment that you start to see.
Sure. Great. Thanks, Pranshu. Sean, we're now getting questions from the audience around like what can they do to get better conversions on their website? So they get a lot of browsers. How do they convert to buyers? I'll ask a related question, and then we can get into this. Like going direct to consumer has been a big buzzword these days. Right? A lot of traditional brands are talking about going direct to customer, and you also talked about B2B getting converted into B2C. There are better margins. You have more control on what the end customer is buying. You have more control on these trends. So if you can touch upon what are, but this transition will never be easy for a traditional brand who've always been into B2B. In terms of your implementations that you've seen, what are two or three things that have worked for these brands to make this transition easier? And then if you can touch upon, once they've gotten into D2C, how do they convert the browsers into buyers? That's one of the questions that's come from the audience.
Okay. I would say the biggest challenge when an organization is moving B2C, especially when we've seen a lot going from the B2B, is that customer experience. So there's two phases to the answer. Number one, how does that organization provide a customer experience that's going to drive traffic directly to their website? And I think that's the key, because they really have to understand their marketing strategies and also the method and the partners into increasing that traffic to the website. They've got to, going from a B2B to B2C, you would normally see more requirements for the functionality like customer segmentation, the checkout process. So there's a lot more options, a lot more complexities in the functionality required, because really you are increasing that customization, but very much increasing that customer experience as they go through that buying process. So we see organizations do this because within the platform we do B2B and B2C. So we are seeing more convergence, because even the B2B side nowadays, they are expecting more of a B2C customer experience, because everybody wants the Amazon look and feel. So when you start looking at that, the organization, the biggest chance they've got is driving new customers directly, bringing that loyalty. When you look in region, which I mentioned, we, as I said, we looked at 1,175 consumers in the region, and free delivery is just so important within region. Now, that then leads on to, when you're going from this B2C environment, affordability in providing free delivery. So this is where data analytics and business intelligence comes to play. You really need to know the metrics of your organization. You really need to know the traffic, the average order value, time between orders, and all that information, because then that will allow you as a business to set the right pricing, to see whether free delivery is affordable at a certain level. So I do think that data intelligence is really important as well.
Okay. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
Anshuk, the next question is for you. We've talked about marketing being more cost effective now, but a lot of SMEs particularly have approached us saying that while large brands can have big marketing budgets, they have very limited budgets to operate on. With your experience of working with some mid-sized or SMEs, can you share some cost-effective tricks that have worked for businesses to get more sales, especially for a newly launched website or platform?
Absolutely, Kapil. I think one challenge which a lot of SMBs typically have is when they start your e-commerce marketing, they typically follow the common trend of marketing, which is basically run a lot of awareness campaigns and then expect the sales to come.
Right.
But the challenge with e-commerce is awareness becomes very difficult. See, if you're in an offline world, awareness essentially means a 3-kilometer vicinity or a 5-kilometer vicinity. In an online world, you're pretty much targeting the entire country, and in many cases, multiple countries. So if you start focusing on the awareness part of your store, you might end up spreading your budgets very thin.
Right.
So my recommendation would be, for an SMB, don't focus on awareness. There are digital platforms like Facebook, which provide you very focused purchase campaigns.
Okay.
These are those campaigns which will only target those people who are most likely to purchase on your website. Right? And now you might ask the question, how would Facebook know who is more likely to purchase? Very simple. There is a way to configure the Facebook pixel on your website so that Facebook automatically knows who is coming on your website and who is purchasing. The moment you send this information to Facebook, the AI of Facebook is so strong that it will go out and search for exactly those people who are most likely to purchase on your website.
Okay.
Right? So as long as you take care of these 2 or 3 very basic hacks in setting up your campaign, number 1, get your pixel right. Number 2, set up the purchase campaign on Facebook. And number 3, of course, focus on product specific ads. Okay, rather than focusing on a brand ad, focus on a product ad. As long as you do these 2-3 things, you will be able to generate sales from the first 1,000 dirham which you invest. Rather than saying that, look, my first 5,000 or 10,000 dirhams will go into awareness. What I'm assuring you here is you get your first 1,000 dirhams and you will get sales out of your first 1,000 dirhams also if you set up your campaigns right.
Okay. This is very useful, Anshuk. Thanks so much. Raghu, the next question is for you. And in fact, one of the folks in the audience also asked this. Like COVID-19 has opened up possibilities for a lot of interesting collaborations. One question is, are you seeing any interesting partnerships emerge in the conversational commerce space? The second is that many businesses do not have payments associated with their website and want to send payment links to their customer, and WhatsApp is a great mechanism where people can send payment links and get their payments there. So is there a trend that you've seen there, and are there specific industries where you're seeing conversational commerce being adopted more than the others?
Sure. I'll answer these 3 questions in sequence. One, on the new partnerships emerging. They are emerging every single day. And just last week, we partnered with Apple Business Chat and Google Business Messaging. The kind of experiences that they are enabling, which are transformational, is when somebody is searching for a business on a Google Maps, they can start a conversation right from the Google Maps and go through the entire conversational commerce experience within that platform. The second, there's somebody searching for a store. They find a store on Google search. They can start the conversation right there on Google Messenger, and which is powered by conversational commerce, and they can transact within that chat window, right? And these are right off the press. I mean, these are some things that just came up over the last 2 weeks, and partnerships are emerging. We are also partnering with a lot of payment companies. Setu is one, just essentially enabling link-based payments on WhatsApp and having the entire transaction done within the chat window itself. So partnerships are coming up there. We partnered with Shopify to enable immediate commerce for companies that have a Shopify app that's out there. They can just launch their shopping platforms on Apple Chat, Google Messaging, WhatsApp within a single click. So no more customization that needs to be done. All the backend processes thing there. So very interesting partnerships emerging in that space. And I covered your question on the payments as well. And India, and we are seeing UPI-based payments in other markets. It easily integrates with Apple Pay, Google Pay, and directly enables transactions on these WhatsApp platforms. The third question was around, sorry, I think, is there anything that I missed in your?
The specific industries where you've seen this adoption being there.
So food is kind of QSRs, etc., right? McDonald's, etc. So we're seeing food and QSR being the number one. We're seeing grocery. We're seeing electronics. We're seeing fashion shopping. So these are all the top categories in adopting conversational commerce.
Sure. Thanks so much, Raghu. Hasan, the next question is for you. That given COVID, we've seen the cost of fulfillment increase because you have to implement social distancing norms in the warehouse. You have to have more stringent norms for safe handling of products. Have you seen any innovations in the industry which players have done to absorb this cost? And like, for example, investment in, let's say, robotics or more automation in the warehouse. And with VAT slated to increase now from July, are we expected to see lower e-commerce demand in the time to come, or are you planning for even more capacity in spite of these shocks that the industry is absorbing right now?
Yeah, so of course the cost getting higher with this kind of situation. So you have to increase the manpower because there is a social distancing, and also there is a huge demand coming. So whenever you have more demand, you have to meet that demand with manpower. So this is number one. Number two, we increase the number of safety and health equipment and materials with COVID-19. And you know, it's a consumable. So you are buying and purchasing every time. So all these are impacting your cost when it comes to inside the warehouse. However, I believe online and offline, we have now a very tough lesson that we learned out of this pandemic. And we have to be ready for, I don't want to be an unoptimistic guy, but we might face another wave. We don't know. So everyone should be ready for this. And I believe we as a logistic partners for our online and offline businesses, we have to be ready for this. So I believe, yes, we are going to be ready for this increasing capacity. However, investing in robotics or in automation, this is honestly related to the scale as well. So, as you know, it's a kind of investment that you need to really monitor the market and the economy, and you have to monitor also the people behavior. And then you can decide if this is really important to go with, or you can continue with just increasing the capacity with the manual ways. I believe that with the 15% VAT, there is a slowdown. Will be a slowdown in the beginning. However, everyone knows that online is now a very important sales channel. Everyone should invest there, and we believe that we have to meet these kind of expectations. It's not good that to have a huge business shifting from offline to online without having capacity. This is really poor, and our mission to meet that demand if it's happened.
Okay, thanks, Hasan. Pranshu, we have touched upon a lot of demand, fulfillment, etc. The returns is an intrinsic part of e-commerce. It's a necessary evil, so to say, for businesses in e-commerce. Are there any, again, especially in COVID-19, have you seen any trends that have happened with respect to returns? Are customers now more conscientious in terms of not returning a lot of products, or there is a higher cost of handling returns because it has to be extra safe? You have to sanitize the products while coming back to the warehouse. And what are businesses doing currently to handle this change?
So Kapil, yes, because returns were not happening during the lockdown, companies had to increase that return window, and now there's a huge backlog that remains. Right? Okay. So from an e-commerce company's perspective, there's a huge return volume that they now need to process.
Okay.
In terms of the cost increase, so making a product ready for resale, that particular cost has increased by 25 to 30% right now because of the different sanitization process that you have to follow. You have to keep the product unused for a while. So there is a huge cost increase that has happened there. Now, how do you optimize this cost? So there are two approaches that I would suggest. One is you've got to start reducing the returns window, and I know it's going to impact the conversions significantly. So one thing that you can do is have a differential return policy across different categories. So maybe specifically the categories which have a higher returns, you might consider lowering that window. But again, you have to look at the conversions in relation to this entire exercise. The second place where I believe some automation can be brought in is how do you process the returns, right? So there are still some companies which accept returns over emails, which again leads to an increase in cost for you. So that entire process of getting the returns from customers, processing it internally in the sense that you have to assign a logistics partner to it, you have to manage the pickup failures, that entire process should be automated. And that's where you can start to see a lot of money getting saved. Because, you cannot stop the returns from happening, but processing the returns can be made cheaper.
Okay, understood. Thanks. That brings to the end for the questions that I had to ask. I will now take up the audience question and answer. We are getting a lot of questions from the audience. I think the first question is for, and anyone can take it. We see in COVID-19, particularly in the last couple of months, we have seen the proportion of prepaid orders increase. While this has been a predominantly cash and delivery market as far as e-commerce is concerned. And can any of you comment on whether this trend is expected to continue? Are we seeing a fundamental shift in consumer preferences to go for more prepaid orders, or do you see it coming back to again COD in the next 6 to 12 months? Sean or Hasan or Pranshu, if you can, one of you can take this.
During COVID-19, as I said, the post-world after the pandemic will change. And I know that prepayment is probably the way forward if we could go in on the digital platform where cash payment has been made in store. You can talk about click and collect, that can provide that. But then there's a cart abandonment where I think it's 15% of people don't turn up to the store if they haven't prepaid. So I think the options are there. I think it's something that we'll see. The answer will be at post-COVID-19 and how quick we go back to the physical store and how many people stop buying online and go back to the old practices. I believe that so many people have now moved to the digital way of buying. I think personally that moving forward, you will see prepayment happen more and more.
Sure. In terms of logistics, there is a question from the audience, particularly on the cross-border piece. We've seen the Middle East geography heavily dependent on, let's say, China for product sourcing. Have we, one, are we seeing an increased trend, particularly from India to Middle East? And two, are there any services that any business can use to streamline the logistics from India to Middle East?
I believe Pranshu can answer this, and also I will contribute more. Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Pranshu.
No, so I have a very small piece to add here. So from what we have observed, I've talked to a lot of retailers in the Middle East on this specific issue. They say that right now they don't see any replacement for China, okay, whether locally or whether from India. What they're saying is that in terms of freight cost, which has suddenly shot up, the air freight has suddenly increased significantly due to the COVID. Now the sea freight has turned out to be really resilient, right? So that has proven to be an alternative in the sense that now people are still able to buy from China at costs which are similar to what were there earlier. Hasan, any opinion that you have on this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I believe today, so everyone rely on China. This is no doubt. However, there is opportunity for other markets to get in Saudi Arabia. This is the most important thing. Where we have today a very nice regulations when it comes to foreign investors. SAGIA supporting big time to let foreign investors to get in Saudi Arabia and to have their own license to run their businesses. So when you have your own license, then you can control the logistics big time, and also you can control the cross-border big time. And this is I'm inviting everyone to figure out these kind of regulations. It's really relaxed, and everyone now can have his own license in Saudi.
Okay, great, thanks. There are a lot of questions about, given that grocery has seen a big spike in the last couple of months, there are a couple of questions around groceries and FMCGs. They're asking as to what is the effective marketing channel to reach to grocery consumer post COVID-19, or are there any ways to target audience in a better way? So Raghu, you mentioned about WhatsApp working amazingly well for FMCG. Are there specific things that any brand should keep in mind for using WhatsApp as a medium for targeting grocery consumer? And Anshuk and Sean, you can also add if there are any other mechanisms that you've come across, particularly for FMCG or grocery, to target these consumers.
I'll talk about some of the things that companies have done to reach their consumers on WhatsApp. One is, I think a lot of they pasted this WhatsApp QR codes in a lot of apartment community complexes.
Okay.
Just becomes an easy way for them, contactless, and people scan it and other things. Again, both in the messaging in terms of distribution within the apartments, you can scan it, order here, distributing a number that people can share. So what we have seen is that somebody shares that you can order grocery on this number. We have seen that being shared around WhatsApp groups that, hey, you can just click here and start ordering. So those kind of mechanisms where you're not really spending a lot on your digital advertising, but using networks that are built in to kind of drive the message. So we have seen these kind of strategies work.
Sure. Anshuk, Sean, would you want to weigh in on this?
Yes, I can add a couple of points, Kapil. So when we work with a few grocery players, I think there are two challenges we have seen. Number one, sometimes grocery players try to be very hyper-local, which means you might say that, look, I want to advertise in this 5-kilometer vicinity of my store. Okay. Now, while Facebook theoretically allows you to run a hyper-local campaign of 1 kilometer, 2-kilometer vicinity, what we have usually seen is in such a narrow audience, your cost really skyrockets, which means if you were otherwise spending a certain amount of money to reach out to people, you might end up spending like 3x or 4x the amount because you are very narrowly focusing your campaign. So one suggestion for a grocery player would be go a little wide, at least have a city-wide presence. A very locality-wide presence will be not very profitable from an ads perspective. Okay. The second point which I have for grocery players is the average selling price of grocery needs to be very closely looked at. There are some players which might have average selling price of 10 dirhams or 30 dirhams or 50 dirhams. Profitability will become very difficult because from a platform like Facebook, you're acquiring customer by paying money for the traffic, not really paying money for the conversion.
Right.
So my recommendation there would be try to bundle your products, figure out those combinations which can give you average selling price of 100 dirhams or 200 dirhams, which can make your sale profitable. So these would be two suggestions from an ads perspective.
Sure. Thanks, Anshuk. The next question is for both Pranshu and Hasan. There's a question that the logistics and Hasan, you also mentioned that the cost of serving a customer has increased. Do you think, are you seeing businesses beginning to pass this cost to consumers? Is it a good time to start charging consumers for deliveries, or should they continue with free deliveries? And second question was around trends of click and collect or delivery from store. Are you seeing any rise in those trends in the recent past, where deliveries rather than happening from a warehouse are happening from a store? These are the two questions for both of you. And maybe Hasan, you can take up the first one about increased cost. Have you seen businesses passing on this cost, or what are they doing or are you seeing still businesses continuing to offer deliveries free of charge?
Yeah, so I don't see that online stores should go with the strategy of having free delivery all the time. So it should be linked with basket size value. So if you're buying, let's say $100, you're gonna have free delivery. But offering free delivery all the time, this is not workable, because at the end of the day, there is a basket size value and there is a unit of economy you have to meet. And to push your customers to increase the basket value, to have a free delivery offer. This is make a lot of sense for me. Other than that, I don't see this as a preferable offer that you should offer in your online business. When it comes to click and collect, we are working on a solution like that. However, it's really depend on the lockdown, because this service will be killed if there is a lockdown. No one can go and collect from retailer. So
right.
This is really critical point where you have to be very clear when you launch this kind of services. I believe with the high returns happening, this will solve the issue. you have an issue where the client is not available. So he might be in the work, and after 2 hours he'll be at his home, and with a big distance between both locations. So having this kind of click and collect is really important. But with COVID-19, we need to think about it again, and we need to see how this should work with the current situations.
Sure. Thanks. Pranshu, if you'd like to weigh in on particularly on the Omni, I know you're working with brands in Middle East. That trend is, we are at least seeing that as on the rise. So are you seeing any specific trends like delivery from store being more click and collect, as Hasan pointed out, maybe may not be the right time to do it today, but are you seeing brands getting ready for it once the unlocking starts to happen even at a larger scale? Are brands investing in that direction?
Yes, Kapil, they are. So, I mean, I would completely agree with what Hasan just said. From the consumer side, it's one issue that would people be actually able to go and collect these orders if the lockdown comes into play. But the other part is, are brands ready to serve that system, right? So far, very limited brands had that omni-channel system in which they were able to service demands directly from the stores. But now they've really started to think about it, and because all the traditional retailers, they are now starting to have digitization done in-house. So these people have started to build omni-channel systems to ensure that in the next 3 to 4 months, they are ready to serve this click and collect system.
Sure. Thanks, Pranshu. We are seeing some very interesting questions about different industries wanting to go e-commerce. And Sean, I would like your opinion on that. There is a question on insurance industry, or an industry which is to do with off-road services like shocks and suspensions and other ancillary items. In your experience, have you seen e-commerce getting adopted in these industries, and how has probably Magento helped in these implementations? Are there any specific nuances that they need to be careful about?
On the question for off-road vehicles, parts, suspensions, yes, we have I see a lot in the automobile industry. It's a fairly strong market for us. Jaguar Land Rover being a good example, and many more. So the answer is definitely a yes. We do see e-commerce businesses when it comes to spare parts, etc. On the insurance business, we do have some examples, and that's normally regarding non-regulated policies where it's very often add-ons like health insurance companies trying to sell iWatches and bicycles, etc. For health reasons. So we see that as part of a loyalty scheme, and that's quite a good fit with e-commerce. For insurance across the board, we see it, but it's not one of the high growth areas.
Okay, sure. Thanks. And Anshuk, for you, I think there's a question around fashion. I know fashion was one of the most hit, it not being in the essential categories across the globe, but now it's started to recover. Have you seen in terms of the brands that you worked in, are they investing in their product innovations as well, like the fashion products that the brands are churning out? Would you, for example, have garments which will have ancillaries like masks already stitched in together? So would be great to hear your experiences. And Sean, you can please feel free to weigh in on that as well.
Absolutely, Kapil. So a large portfolio of the brands we work with are actually in the fashion and apparel space. We have seen a few innovations in this space. I'll give a very small example. Like one of the brands we work with used to be very heavy in women dresses, but those were those dresses which you will wear out to a party. So they may not really have the best cotton cloth which can actually be worn in a summer in, let's say, at home, right? So what they did is they did two things. Number one, they rolled out a range of inventory which was more on cotton and less on silk. Okay. Second, they also called that range as work at home range. Okay. It's very important to really position your inventory, right? You have to position your product, which kind of talks about the USP of the product. So they said that, look, they have come up with a new work at home inventory for working women. Right? And that positioning really ticked off. They were able to scale really well because this is something which resonated with the people, and it's also the need of the hour. Of course, there are some brands which also added masks as accessories, which is also doing quite well. With the one challenge that there are certain restrictions on advertising masks on platforms like Facebook. So while you can actually have mask as an accessory, having mask as a main product becomes a challenge. Plus also mask comes with a very low average selling price, which as I mentioned is a kind of a challenge in social platforms.
Sure.
So these are some things which I have seen.
Sure. I'll take one last question, and this is for you, Sean. There's a business who wants to ask that they're finding it very difficult. They're finding it very difficult for consumers to go through the entire checkout process. Is there a possibility for them to have a one-click checkout process and make it easier for conversions to happen? Can they implement something of that sort on their website?
Yeah, that's standard functionality. That's out of the box. That's no customization. So that's easy. And if whoever's asking that question wants to reach out, I can get one of my sales team in the region to take them through that process or provide or show them that functionality. What's interesting as well is on the previous question, I'm not an expert on clothing or designs, but it does touch on customer segmentation functionality, where you want to, approach and do campaigns, but it also touches on AI, which we haven't really talked about. And it does touch on the intelligence of the recommendation engines. So if someone is buying a certain dress, the recommendation can be a mask can go with that dress or whatever. So I think rather than just talk about the clothing, I think we should talk about the customer segmentation, how you can do campaigns, and also the AI functionality for a recommendations engine. And again, all that is standard as in the standard platform.